Welcome to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. This podcast is dedicated to EAS employees of the U.S. Postal Service and members of the National Association of Postal Supervisors. So, pour yourself a cup of coffee and join us for today's episode. And now, here's your host, Robert Wakefield.
Good morning, Branch 32, and good morning to all of our EAS friends across the country. Welcome to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast presented by the Nashville Post Office Credit Union. I'm your host, Robert Wakefield, president of Branch 32. Thank you so much, studio audience. Thank you. Hey, listen, it's great to have you all here. It's time for us to go ahead and pour that first cup. Make a difference this January 30th. Join us at the Nashville Post Office Credit Union's Blood Drive from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Our mission, people helping people, is at the heart of this event. Each donation you make can save lives and strengthen our community. Not only will you have a chance to be a hero, but by signing up and donating, you'll also be entered into a special drawing for a Yeti cooler. And today's first cup, I want to talk about an issue that seems to be, well, it's prevalent in the district that I'm in, and I think it's this way all over the country. And the topic is involuntary reassignments. And when I thought of who could I have on the show that would know something about involuntary reassignments, I went to one person and one person only, and that is the former immediate, what is it? Is it immediate past president? Is that the official title?
It's the immediate past national president.
Okay, immediate past
national title.
Okay, I knew it had a title. Immediate past national president. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Brian Wagner. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Robert. Thank you for having me on. Wow, I'm very excited to be on the number one EAS podcast in the country.
Okay. Well, you are, and for saying that, you will be receiving a $5 bill, so thank you so much.
Okay.
So we're going to start a series today with this podcast, and we're going to go over the next few podcasts. I'm going to have you as our guest, if that's okay, and we're going to talk about involuntary reassignments. And so before we get started, let me ask you this. How prevalent is it in this country?
Involuntary reassignment is very prevalent. I hear, if not weekly, from members who will call me on guidance on an involuntary reassignment. And for the record, I am here on a voluntary assignment, okay? I am here helping out because I really want to make sure the members get this information. And no jokes aside, I tell you what, involuntary reassignment is very serious, especially for our members how it impacts their livelihoods.
That's exactly right. So now, I don't know the history behind the involuntary reassignment, and you've been in NAPS for how many years?
I've been in NAPS for 34 years.
So for 34 years. Yeah. So you know something
Yes.
about involuntary reassignments. Give me the history of involuntary reassignments, and then we'll define it. How about that?
Okay. Well, I'll go back to, I do this training on involuntary reassignments, actually understanding it, and it's part of my Zoom training and the training I do out in the field. But one of the things I went back and started looking at the history. How did it get started? And in all honesty, Robert, when I looked at it, when you're going back to 1989, June 5th, before involuntary reassignments started, the post office put out a policy on vacancy announcement requirements for EAS positions.
Okay. On
how do you post a position? So it was back in 1989, the post office puts out what's the policy, because one of the issues that was brought up is that the post office was told that the recent management organizations such as NAPS had issues with the post office changing jobs around, or the postings didn't have anything specific.
Okay.
So the post office came out with the policy in 89. In 1993, they reissued that policy. Wow, 3 years later.
Wow.
And it talks about in 1989, the Post Office says they changed the elements of a vacancy announcement to include the duty station, work assignment, non-scheduled days, and work hours.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward. So
Sure.
EAS were getting promoted into positions. They knew what their job was, so they knew when to come into work and what to expect. Well, that was reissued in 93, and go figure, and March 18th of 1997, the Post Office reissued that same vacancy announcement in 97.
So they issued it in 93, and then they turned around and reissued it in 97.
Because what was happening, NAPS brought it to two items to the attention of the Post Office, that vacancy announcements weren't specific enough.
Okay.
And they were being posted without specifics, duty station start and end times.
Okay.
Well, we get that fixed. Now, in 1997, and then 2 years later, the first, and November 3rd, 1999, the Post Office issues its first involuntary reassignment policy memo.
Okay.
And I think, to me, it all precipitated from the vacancy announcements being specific on what someone's job was,
Mm-hmm.
and then what was happening, they were being manipulated and not following it and moving people around from their job once they got that promotion.
Okay. So it's amazing to me that it goes back that far.
Oh, which it is amazing. And what's even more amazing, Robert, the involuntary reassignment letter originally started in 1999.
Okay.
3 years later, a little less than 3 years, Patrick Donahoe, who was then our chief operating officer, reissued the policy on January 14th, 2002 on involuntary reassignments, not to do it. Or here's the process.
Okay.
You think, okay, that's another. Well, you would think that would cover the issue. It didn't.
Imagine that.
A little over 2 years later, October 6th, 2004, Patrick Donahoe, who is still our COO, reissued that same policy 2 years later. Just when you think it might be, hey, the Post Office leadership, those in leadership were following the involuntary reassignment policy letter, Pat Donahoe, who then in 2007 in December was deputy PMG, reissued that same policy back from 99, 2000, and 2004, now in 2007.
Okay.
Well, okay, that was 3 years. At least they spent 3 years later. Well, you're not going to believe what happened next.
Let me just take a wild guess. Did they reassign it again?
Do you know what? Fortunately, Pat Donahoe didn't reassign that letter.
Okay.
This time it was Megan Brennan, who was our chief operating officer. 5 years later, almost 5 years later, on April 24th, 2012, Megan Brennan, who was our chief operating officer, reissued the involuntary reassignment policy letter. Okay. All going back to 1999.
Oh, it's the postal way, isn't it?
Well, and Megan Brennan became our postmaster general.
Correct.
After Megan Brennan as postmaster general, the next person who we issued 3 years later, because it still wasn't being followed, was August 31st, 2015, from Dave Williams, at that time the chief operating officer. Okay. And that's where we're at today. So that's the history.
That's the history. So in 2018, there was 3 years did not pass, and they reissued it again. This is the one, huh?
Right. So since 1999, the first one, then we had 2002, 2004, 2007, 2012, 2015. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times this involuntary reassignment letter has been issued.
Incredible.
The final issue is with the Dave Williams policy, which is on the NAPS website under the Forms and Documents section.
Okay, so that's important for everyone to know, and we're going to talk about that, I'm sure. So let's do this, Brian. Let's give a definition. If I was going to ask you what the definition of a temporary involuntary reassignment is, give me a thumbnail sketch what that would look like.
The definition is that the post office needs to temporarily move an EAS employee to a different operation or schedule based off of operational needs, temporary operational needs, or for training purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the history.
So that's the history. That's the history. So in 2018, there was no 3 years did not pass, and they reissued it again. This is the one, huh?
Okay. So if something operational changes are coming, you're going to temporarily move somebody until that operation is up and running and put that person back. It's temporary. Or let's say you got a newly promoted supervisor who's coming online, newly promoted postmaster, and you're going to train them in a different office or different operation because for training purposes, so they can become better at their job and make the post office more successful.
Okay.
The intent was to make it temporary for either operational or training purposes only.
And so that's basically the design for an involuntary reassignment. It's for training or operational needs.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And can I hopefully we have time. I want to kind of go back real quick. Going back to the vacancy announcements back in 1989 and now reissued in 1997. Mm-hmm. In the vacancy announcement, it says all EAS vacancy announcements need to reflect the duty station starting and end times, non-scheduled days, and vacant position. And it says, this is the postal policy. This information is particularly important to employees with family and personal obligations, such as advanced education, child or elder care.
It says that? Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
It says that in the March 18th, 1997 letter on vacancy announcements and notifications. Now, I'm going to tell you that policy on vacancy announcements has been also reissued, and that was done in 2006 by Mangala Gandhi.
Okay.
So I know we're on involuntary reassignments, but the issue comes into treating EAS with dignity and respect. These policy letters were precipitated because NAP stepped up to bring these issues to the attention of the Postal Service so that we could address it. And these aren't ELM references, but these are postal policies established by postal leaders to help address the concerns of people being involuntarily reassigned, making sure vacancies are posted in accordance with their schedules, that people apply for these jobs, they know what to expect when they're getting into that job.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we are now out of time, but I hope that you will come back and do this series with me for the next few podcasts. We're going to be talking about temporary involuntary reassignments. We're going to go into some detail in some of the future episodes. So, Brian, will you please come back on the show?
I will voluntarily come back to your show. And I will even voluntarily give you my ice cream flavor of today if you're interested.
I'm ready to hear it. Let's go.
Well, this is a cup of Joe, right?
It is.
I always bought coffee, and I love coffee, and I love ice cream.
Okay.
And mint ice cream is one of my favorites. But one of the things when you combine coffee and ice cream and my flavor of mint, I'm going to go with the ice cream flavor of the day, mocha mint.
Mocha mint. You can't go wrong.
Coffee, a little bit of mint.
You can't go wrong with that. Brian, thanks so much. I can't wait till we do this in the future podcast. I'm looking forward to it.
I look forward to it. I'm so glad you were able to bring me on. I appreciate being able to share with the members.
All right.
Thank you, Robert.
Thanks, Brian. This March 29th, join us in celebrating a century of trust and a century of service. The Nashville Post Office Credit Union is hosting its 100th annual meeting celebration at the luxurious Sonesta Hotel from 4:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. Mark your calendars for a night of history, festivities, and fun. For more details and updates, like and follow our Facebook page and be a part of this monumental milestone. The Nashville Post Office Credit Union, people helping people since 1925. And for our second cup today, I want to thank the people who actually follow instructions. Well, okay. Following instructions is what we all do from time to time. And I have asked you, not really instructed you, but I have asked you to send me where you're listening from. Let me know the city that you're listening from or the branch. I'd much rather know which branch you're listening from and where it's located. And I heard from someone this week, branch 142 out of Southwest Michigan. Anthony, thanks so much for sending that to me here at the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. And be sure to, if you're listening anywhere in the country, let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to give you a shout out here on the podcast. Well, That's going to do it for today. Thanks so much for listening. This is the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast presented by the Nashville Post Office Credit Union. You know what to do. You know the drill. You like it. You subscribe to it. You share this podcast. Let me know where you're from at SaturdayCupOfJoe@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Robert Wakefield. And remember, every great weekend starts with a great cup of Joe. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to the Saturday Cup of Joe podcast. Please note that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of Robert Wakefield and do not necessarily reflect the views of the National Association of Postal Supervisors. We welcome your questions and comments, so send those to SaturdayCupofJoe@gmail.com.